In this lecture, I will explain the Kepler problem and will give you the explanation of the three laws of planetary motion. In the last lecture, we discussed about central force problem and we had the Lagrangian L is equal to half m r dot square. This is vector r dot square minus v of r. And this vector r is nothing but the position vector of this particle, and its derivative is given by r dot r cap plus r theta dot theta cap in terms of polar coordinates. So Lagrangian will be half m r dot square plus r square theta dot square minus v of r. This potential is spherically symmetric. That is the peculiarity of central force problem, and the motion is always confined to a plane. All those details we discussed in the last lecture. And in a central force problem, we have two first integrals of motion, and the first one is magnitude of angular momentum. It is given by L is equal to mr square theta dot. Second one is total energy, that is given by E equal to half m r dot square plus L square by 2mr square plus V of r. Here r and theta are the polar coordinates of this particle. And we have only a single particle, and this origin is the force center. Okay, that was our formulation. Now, most of the central force problems are two-body problems. Okay, force between two particles. So next we will consider the idea reduction of two-body problem into one-body problem. So consider two masses m1 and m2. You have a coordinate system like this. With respect to this origin O, the position vectors of the masses m1 and m2 are r1 and r2 respectively. Let C be the center of mass of this system, and the position vector of center of mass is given by capital R. And we can define the position of these masses with respect to center of mass, and the position vectors with respect to center of mass is given by r1 prime and r2 prime respectively. Also, this small r, vector r, is the separation vector between the two masses, Okay, now we will consider the total kinetic energy and potential energy of this system. Kinetic energy is given by the kinetic energy, sum of kinetic energy of individual masses, and for this first mass, kinetic energy is half m r1 vector dot square. For the second mass, it is half m2 r2 vector dot square, where r1 vector and r2 vector are the position vectors of these particles. Okay, but using triangular law of vector addition, you can see that this vector r, capital R, plus r1 prime is nothing but this vector r1. Similarly, vector r plus r2 prime is equal to vector r2. So substituting from here for the values of r1 dot will be simply r dot plus r1 prime dot. r2 dot is equal to vector r dot plus r2 prime dot. Substitute for these values r1 dot and r2 dot. We will obtain this much terms, because a plus b the whole square, you will get a square, that will give you this term. 2ab term will give you this term, and b square. So it is half m1 r1 prime dot square. Similarly, in the second case also you will get 3 terms. So there are total 6 terms. And you can combine this term, first and fourth term, in order to write half m1 plus m2 vector r dot square. And you can write the third term here and the last term here. Okay, half m1 r1 prime dot square plus half m2 r2 prime dot square. The remaining 2 terms, you can take this capital R dot outside, and the remaining is m1 r1 dot plus m2 r2 dot. Okay. Now, this m1 r1 prime plus m2 r2 prime is equal to 0 according to principle of moments, because this r1 prime and r2 prime are the position coordinates of these particles with respect to center of mass. By the definition of center of mass, you can see that m1 r1 prime plus m2 r2 prime will be 0. Okay, so this term, if you take the derivative, then also it will be 0. So this term will vanish. So remaining is half m1 plus m2 capital R dot square plus half m1 r1 prime dot square plus half m2 r2 prime dot square. The first term is actually kinetic energy of center of mass, because m1 plus m2 is the total mass of the system. R dot is the position vector of the center of mass. So the system will have a kinetic energy as the sum of kinetic energy of center of mass and kinetic energy about center of mass. For any system of particle or for any rigid body, the total kinetic energy, you can write it as the sum of kinetic energy of center of mass and kinetic energy about center of mass. Okay, these are half m1 r1 prime dot square plus half m2 r2 prime dot square. This is actually the kinetic energy of the system about center of mass. Okay, so this result is a general one. For any rigid body or for any system of particle, the kinetic energy is the sum of two terms. One is kinetic energy of center of mass. The second term is kinetic energy about center of mass. Okay, now we have r2 prime equal to r plus r1 prime. Okay, from this diagram you can see that this r2 prime is actually the total distance r plus r1 prime. Okay, and taking derivative you will get r2 prime dot is equal to r dot plus r1 prime dot. Also from principle of moments we can write m1 r1 prime equal to minus m2 r2 prime, because the sum is 0. So r1 prime is minus m2 by m1 r2 prime. Taking derivative from here and substituting back in this expression, you will get r2 prime dot is equal to r dot minus m2 by m1 r2 prime dot. This will give you a relation for r2 prime dot in terms of r dot, and that is m1 r dot divided by m1 plus m2. You take this term left hand to the left hand side and take r2 prime dot outside, then you will get this result. Similarly, you can write an expression for r1 prime dot, and that will be m2 r dot divided by m1 plus m2. So we can replace this r1 prime dot and r2 prime dot in this expression using these relations. Okay, then we will get kinetic energy is equal to half m1 plus m2 vector r dot square plus half m1 into, this is half m1 into r1 prime dot square, that will be m2 square r dot square divided by m1 plus m2 whole square. Similarly, the last term is half m2 into this square, m1 square vector r dot square divided by m1 plus m2 square. From the last two terms, I can take half outside, m1 m2 r dot square by m1 plus m2 whole square outside. The remaining will be, here you will have an m2, here you will have an m1. So that is m2 plus m1. And that m2 plus m1 will cancel with this square term in the denominator. So the final result is kinetic energy equal to half m1 plus m2 r dot square plus half m1 m2 by m1 plus m2 into vector r dot square. This first one is capital R, and that is the position vector of center of mass, and the second one is small r, and that is the separation vector. Okay, now you can write the Lagrangian. So L is actually T minus V, half m1 plus m2 r dot square plus half m1 m2 by m1 plus m2 vector r dot square minus V of r. In a central force problem, actually the potential depends only on the distance from force center. But here we have a two-body problem, and here we are assuming that the potential depends only on the separation distance. Okay, we are assuming that the system have only a force which is due to an interaction between the two masses, and that the force depends, or the corresponding potential depends only on the interatomic distance. That is our assumption. The only force acting on the system is such that the potential depends only on the interatomic distance, okay, or interparticle distance. So we can write V as a function of R only. Now, from this Lagrangian, you can see that this capital R is a cyclic coordinate, because there is no capital R in this Lagrangian. There is small r dependence, there is small r dot, there is capital R dot, but there is no capital R. A coordinate which is absent in the Lagrangian is known as cyclic coordinate, and the consequence is that the corresponding momentum, conjugate momentum, will be a conserved quantity. That is, here the implication of cyclic coordinate, R as a cyclic coordinate, is that either the system's center of mass is at rest, or the system's center of mass is in uniform motion. Conjugate momentum constant means m r dot is equal to a constant. So either r dot is 0 or r dot is a constant. So center of mass is either at rest or in uniform motion. So it's an inertial frame. Okay, center of mass frame is an inertial frame. So we can shift the problem to the center of mass frame. Then we can put r dot as 0. Okay, we can shift the problem in the center of mass frame. Then we can take r dot as 0. So this L or this kinetic energy, you can write it as half, you can take r dot as 0, half this m1 m2 divided by m1 plus m2 is mu, half mu r dot square, where mu is m1 m2 by m1 plus m2. It is known as reduced mass. It is known as reduced mass of the system. And here r is the separation distance. Okay, now I already mentioned this point, the interaction, but there is only interaction potential which solely depends on the separation distance. Then V is V of R. Then we can write Lagrangian as L is equal to T minus V. So L is equal to T is half mu R dot square minus V of R. This R is vector R. Okay, suppose you consider a frame which is fixed on any one of these masses. You have two masses, you take a frame which is fixed on any one of the masses. Then this separation distance will be, or separation vector will be, the position vector of the second particle. And with respect to this origin, you can assign a polar coordinate r and theta to this particle. And in terms of that, this vector r dot, derivative of this vector r will be r dot r cap plus r theta dot theta cap. So substituting here, you will get this as half mu into r dot square plus r square theta dot square minus V of r. So this form of Lagrangian is exactly similar to the one we obtained for a single body problem with its origin at center of force. Here we have exactly the same Lagrangians. Okay, half m vector r dot square minus V of r, and it is equal to half m r dot square plus r square theta dot square minus V of r. So we can conclude that when there are two masses, consider a frame fixed on one of the masses, then treat the problem as a single body problem of mass mu equal to m1 m2 divided by m1 plus m2, the reduced mass of the system, and distance from force center equivalent to the separation distance between the two masses. Okay, so in this procedure, you can treat a two body problem into a single body problem, and you can use all the equations that we derived in the last lecture for a single body problem to a two body problem also. Okay, all the formulations are exactly the same because the Lagrangian has the same form. If you have a single body problem or you have a two-body problem like this. The only difference is replace the distance from force center with the separation distance and replace the mass with the reduced mass of the system. Reduced mass of the system. Okay. Now, we will discuss Kepler problem. Kepler problem. We already know that for any central force problem, we have two first integrals of motion. First one is angular momentum L, which is given by mr square theta dot. Second one is total energy E, it is given by half mr dot square plus L square by 2mr square plus V of r. So this equation, we can write it as d theta by dt equal to L by mr square. From this equation, I can write dr by dt is equal to E minus L square by 2mr square minus V of r into 2 divided by m square root. Okay, so dr by dt is square root of 2 by m E minus V of r minus L square by 2mr square. One is a relation connecting theta and t, a differential equation. This is a differential equation in r and t. So the next procedure is eliminate t between these two equations in order to obtain an expression for r and theta. Okay, that will give you the orbit equation. Okay, so that is the next idea. Eliminate t between these two equations. So 1 divided by 2, I will get d theta by dr is equal to L by mr square, square root 2 by m, E minus V of r minus L square by 2mr square. Integrating, you will get integral d theta equal to integral L by m into dm by r square, dr by r square, square root of 2 by m E minus V of r minus L square by 2mr square. Now, these are all true for any central force problem. Kepler problem is a special case of central force problem. Here the potential V of r will have the form minus k by r. Okay. So a central force problem reduces to a Kepler problem when you replace the potential V of r with minus k by r. Then this expression becomes integral d theta equal to integral dr by r square m by L. This L will go to the numerator, m by L, square root 2 by m into E plus k by r minus L square by 2m r square. Now put 1 by r is equal to u. So minus 1 by r square dr is equal to du. Therefore, you can write dr by r square as minus du divided by square root of, you take this m and L into the bracket. Okay. Then you will get the first term as 2me by L square, because this m will be m square inside the bracket, L will be L square inside the bracket. One of them will cancel with this. So the remaining is 2me by L square. Second time will be 2mk by L square into u, where u is 1 by r. And the last term is minus u square. Integrating this, you will get theta minus theta prime is equal to minus integral du divided by square root of, call this as alpha, call this 2mk by L square as beta, and this minus 1 as gamma. So this becomes minus integral du by square root alpha plus beta u plus gamma u square, where theta prime is the integration constant resulting from this integration. And now we want to evaluate this indefinite integral du by square root alpha plus beta u plus gamma u square. For that, you take a root gamma outside. Then the remaining is u square plus beta by gamma u plus alpha by gamma whole raised to half. And this is integral du by root gamma into, make it a perfect square. So this becomes the first two times, I can write it as u plus beta by 2 gamma the whole square. So a plus b whole square will give you u square, 2ab term will give you beta by gamma u, and there is an additional term, beta square by 4 gamma square. So I have to subtract that term, and there is already an alpha by gamma here. So this is this whole raised to half. This procedure is known as making perfect square. Now 1 by root gamma you can take outside, integral du divided by u plus beta by 2 gamma the whole square minus a square. Okay, minus a square, where a is square root beta square by beta square minus 4 alpha gamma divided by 2 gamma. Okay, so this term you can take LCM. LCM will be 4 gamma square. So this becomes 4 gamma alpha minus beta square divided by 4 gamma square. Take a negative sign outside and call this entire term as a square. So that is this term. Now put u plus beta by 2 gamma as y. Then du becomes dy. Du becomes dy. So this is 1 by root gamma integral dy divided by, this term is nothing but y square minus a square whole raised to half. Take a negative sign outside. So this becomes 1 by root minus gamma integral dy divided by a square minus y square raised to half. A square minus y square raised to half. That negative one is comes out from this square root, and here also I put inside a square root. Okay, that doesn't matter. So this is 1 by root minus gamma integral dy divided by a square minus y square whole raised to half. Now put y is equal to minus a cos theta. Then dy becomes plus a sin theta d theta. Replace this dy with a sin theta d theta, and a square minus y square raised to half becomes a sin theta. So that will cancel, and the remaining is integral d theta. Integral d theta is theta, but theta from here, theta is nothing but cos inverse minus y by a. Cos inverse minus y by a. So the result is 1 by root 2 minus gamma cos inverse minus y. What is y? It is u plus beta by 2 gamma. Take LCM. So that becomes 2 gamma u plus beta, but there is a negative sign here. So minus 2 gamma u minus beta, and divided by 2 gamma, that will cancel with this 2 gamma in A. In A also there is divided by 2 gamma. So that will cancel. The remaining is minus 2 gamma u minus beta divided by square root of beta square minus 4 alpha gamma. Okay. So substitute back in this expression, theta minus theta prime is equal to integral this quantity. For this integral we already obtained this result plus some integration constant. Okay, here also you will have some integration constant because it is an indefinite integral. So take that integration constant along with the theta prime, make it theta 0. So the final integration constant will be theta 0. So theta minus theta 0 is equal to minus 1 by root minus gamma. From where this minus sign? In this integral you already have a minus sign. For this integral you got this result. So when you substitute back in the original expression, there will be a minus sign. Minus 1 by root 2 minus gamma cos inverse minus 2 gamma u minus beta square divided by square root of beta square minus 4 alpha gamma. Theta minus theta 0 equal to minus 1 by root 2 minus gamma cos inverse. Take a beta outside from both numerator and denominator. Then the first term here becomes minus 2 gamma u by beta minus 1 divided by this beta square will come outside and becomes beta, and it will cancel with the beta taken outside from numerator. So the remaining is 1 minus 4 alpha gamma by beta square. Now I will substitute back all the values. Gamma is minus 1, alpha is 2me by L square, beta is 2mk by L square. Substitute all those values here. I will get this minus, I multiply entire equation with a negative sign. Minus of theta minus theta not equal to minus gamma becomes plus 1. 1 by root 1 is 1. Cos inverse, this becomes, this gamma is minus 1. So this becomes plus, and beta is 2mk by L square. Substituting that value, you will get L square u by mk minus 1 divided by square root of 1 plus 2el square by mk square. 2el square by mk square. So substituting for alpha gamma by beta square, I will get this term. Okay. Now this quantity inside bracket, you can write it as cos of minus theta naught, but cos is an even function, so no need to write this negative sign. So I will get L square u by mk square minus 1 is equal to square root of 1 plus 2el square by mk square cos theta minus theta naught. Take this minus 1 to the right hand side. L square u by mk square equal to 1 plus square root of 1 plus 2el square by mk square cos theta minus theta naught. So u equal to mk by L square. This is actually mk, L square u by mk. Okay, this is L square u by mk. So u is equal to mk by L square into 1 plus square root of 1 plus 2e L square by mk square cos theta minus theta naught. But actually u is 1 by r. 1 by r is mk by L square 1 plus square root of 1 plus 2e L square by mk square cos theta minus theta naught. So this is the orbit equation in the case of Kepler problem, and this is a relation connecting r and theta. Okay, now if we choose the initial conditions such that theta 0 equal to 0, then this equations become 1 by r is equal to mk by L square 1 plus square root of 1 plus 2e L square by mk square cos theta. Okay, this is actually equation of a conic. What is a conic? A conic section. For defining a conic section, we need two things. One is a straight line, which is known as directrix, and the second one is a focus, a point. Okay, a point and a straight line. This point is known as focus, straight line is known as directrix. And suppose you have a curve like this red one. You have a curve like this. Any point on this curve P satisfies a condition of the form Fp divided by Pd equal to constant. Okay, the distance from focus, that is Fp, and the perpendicular distance from the straight line, that is Pd. The ratio should be a constant. Any curve satisfies this condition is known as a conic section. Okay, if the ratio of the distance from a common point and a common line is a constant, and that constant is known as eccentricity, then the curve is known as a conic section. If that ratio is 1, that curve is known as a parabola. If that ratio is less than 1, that curve is known as an ellipse. If that ratio is greater than 1, that curve is known as a hyperbola, and so on. Okay, so we can derive an expression for this conic from this relation, figure. Fp by Pd is equal to a constant. What is Fp? Fp is actually the radial coordinate of this particle or this point, okay, r, and this angle is theta, so this length is r cos theta. So Pd, I can write it as a minus r cos theta, where a is the distance between focus and directrix. So r divided by a minus r cos theta equal to eccentricity. So r is equal to Ea minus r into E cos theta. Take this to the left hand side. R into 1 plus E cos theta equal to Ea. So 1 by r is equal to 1 by Ea into 1 plus E cos theta. 1 plus E cos theta. So we can write this as 1 by r is equal to some constant into 1 plus E cos theta. So this has exactly the same form as this expression. Some constant into 1 plus a constant into cos theta. So this is the general equation for a conic in terms of polar coordinates, and Kepler problem also gives the same expression. So comparing these two, we can write eccentricity of Kepler's orbit E equal to square root of 1 plus 2E L square by mk square. So eccentricity is a function of total energy and angular momentum. Okay, now if you consider a case of non-zero angular momentum, then we can have these four cases. First one is with the capital E, total energy of the system or of the particle is greater than 0. Then this eccentricity will be greater than 1, because all these quantities are positive. So 1 plus a positive quantity will give you an eccentricity which is greater than 1, and the orbit will be a hyperbola. And if this total energy is 0, you will get eccentricity as 1 and the orbit will be a parabola. If the total energy is negative but it is greater than minus mk square by 2l square, then eccentricity will be between 0 and 1. Then orbit will be an ellipse. And if eccentricity is 0, that is total energy, when total energy is equal to minus mk square by 2l square, minus mk square by 2l square, then orbit will be a circle. Orbit will be a circle. We already done the qualitative analysis of this in the previous lecture, and we know that for energy greater than 0, orbit will be unbounded. For energy equal to 0, orbit will be unbounded, and that two cases quantitatively we proved that they are hyperbola and parabola respectively. And for energy less than 0, we already proved that it will be a bounded orbit between two distances r1 and r2, and here we quantitatively obtained that it is an ellipse in the case of Kepler problem. And if the total energy is equal to V effective minimum, we know that it is a circle. Here also we obtained the same result. So these are the various possible orbits in the case of Kepler problem. Now for planetary motion, the total energy is less than 0 because it is a bounded system. Okay, the planets are bounded to or bounded by the attraction of sun. So the planetary motion, the total energy of planets is less than 0. So the orbit will be elliptical. Orbit will be elliptical. That is Kepler's first law. Every planet moves around the sun in an elliptical orbit with sun at one of its foci. Okay, so we proved the first law of planetary motion. Okay, we derived an equation for the orbit using Kepler potential, and we obtained 4 possibilities. But for a planet, the total energy is less than 0, and the case for total energy less than 0 is an ellipse. So we can say that every planet moves around the sun in an elliptical orbit with the sun at one of its foci. Okay, now consider this figure, and this is about a satellite launching. Suppose this is Earth. The radius of Earth is r, capital R, and suppose you want to launch a satellite, and you want to launch it from a height h above the Earth's surface. So depending on the velocity, initial velocity of the satellite, it can have circular orbit, or it can have elliptical orbit, or it can escape through a parabolic trajectory, or it can escape through a hyperbolic trajectory. So first we will consider the case of a circular orbit. If velocity v1, this black line, velocity is low, it is equal to square root gm by r plus h, where m is the mass of Earth, r is radius of Earth, h is this height from the surface of Earth, g is gravitational constant. If velocity v1 is square root gm divided by r plus h, then the orbit will be a circle. The satellite will move in a circular orbit. If the velocity is greater than this, that is this blue arrow, and it is less than square root 2gm by r plus h. Square root 2gm by r plus h, you already know that this is an equation for escape velocity. So if velocity is between square root gm by r plus h and square root 2gm by r plus h, orbit will be an ellipse. This second one. Okay. If velocity is exactly equal to the escape velocity root 2gm by r plus h, then the satellite will escape in a parabolic trajectory. And if velocity is greater than this root 2gm by r plus h, it will escape in a hyperbolic trajectory. So depending on the velocity at the time of launch, the satellite can move in a circular orbit or in an elliptical orbit with different eccentricities. Okay. If velocity is very high, it will escape to infinity. Now, I will discuss Kepler's second law. We have angular momentum L is equal to mr square theta dot. So this will give me an expression r square theta dot is equal to L by m. Half r square theta dot is equal to L by 2. Okay. And this L, we already know that this L is a constant of motion. Mass is also a constant in the non-relativistic case. So this right hand side is a constant. So that means half r square theta dot is a constant. Now what is half r square theta dot? Consider an orbit like this. It may not be closed. It can be an open orbit also. This is force center. A particle is moving through this trajectory. Then the radial distance r when it is at p, and in a short interval of time this r vector sweeps out an angle d theta and it reaches q. What is the area covered by this radius vector? Area swept out by the radius vector during a time dt. It is given by this area of this triangle. You can assume that it is a triangle for very small angle d theta. Then area is half BH, where B is the base, it is R, and H is roughly R d theta. Okay, H is approximately R d theta. So it is half R square d theta. This is area swept out by the radius vector. Then what is aerial velocity? What is the area covered in unit time? This is area covered in a time dt. So area covered in unit time dA by dt is half r square d theta by dt. So it is half r square theta dot. So half r square theta dot we already proved that is the constant. That means aerial velocity of any object moving under the influence of central force is constant. Okay, aerial velocity of any object moving under the influence of any central force is constant. Now in our case, in a Kepler problem, or for the case of planetary motion, the planets always moves in an elliptical orbit around the sun. This is sun, this is planet. And suppose when it is at a larger distance from the sun, this planet covers a distance this much in a time dt. Then the area swept out by the radius vector is shown by this blue color. And when the planet is near to the sun, it has to cover a greater distance. So the velocity should be high. When the planet is nearer to sun, the velocity should be high. Then only the area covered during this time interval and during this time interval, both are equal. The area should be also equal. Then only aerial velocity will be a constant. So the velocity of planet near to the sun will be high compared to velocity of planet when it is far away from the sun. So this area, this blue area and this red area should be the same if both are covered in the same time. So Kepler's second law states that aerial velocity of planet is a constant. Aerial velocity of planet is a constant, and this is the proof. Now Kepler's third law. What is Kepler's third law? Square of period of revolution is proportional to cube of semi-major axis. We already know that theta dot is L by mr square because we have the first integral of motion L equal to mr square theta dot. So L by 2m is half r square theta dot. L by 2m is half r square theta dot is nothing but aerial velocity dA by dt. So this gives integral dA equal to integral L by 2m dt. Integral L by 2m dt. For a full period t equal to tau, let the period is tau. Okay, when it completes a full rotation, t is tau, and the area of the ellipse is given by pi ab, where a is the semi-major axis and b is the semi-minor axis. Area of an ellipse is pi ab. Substituting back here, integral dA becomes total area, that is pi ab, and this integral dt becomes tau, L by 2m tau. So tau is equal to 2m pi ab by L, 2m pi ab by L. But for an ellipse, semi-minor axis B is equal to semi-major axis into square root of 1 minus e square, where e is eccentricity. This is the standard equation from conic sections. B equal to a into root of 1 minus e square. Substituting here, you will get tau square equal to 2 square is 4, 4m square pi square. This is already, there is an a, that becomes a square. This b is a into root of 1 minus e square, that becomes a square into 1 minus e square divided by L square. Okay. Now we have the equation 1 by r is equal to a constant into 1 plus e cos theta, 1 plus e cos theta, and that constant is actually mk by L square, mk by L square. And for an ellipse, this distance, this distance is known as perihelion if this is sun, and this distance is known as aphelion. These distances are usually known as apsidal distances. If at the center, if you have earth, and if you consider the motion of a satellite, this nearest distance is known as perigee, and this for longest distance is known as apogee. If the center is sun and you are considering the motion of a planet, this distance is known as perihelion and this distance is known as aphelion. And you can see that this R1 plus R2 is actually 2a. R1 plus R2 is actually 2 times semi-major axis. And also you have these expressions. R1 is a into 1 minus e and R2 is a into 1 plus e. Okay, when you add these two, R1 plus R2, you will get 2a, and R1, R2, you will get a square into 1 minus e square. And this is the expression 1 by R1. R1 is the smallest distance. In this expression, if you put theta equal to 0, this right hand side will be maximum, and 1 by r will be maximum, so r will be minimum. So for the smallest distance r, this theta should be 0. That is why I put 1 by r1 equal to mk by L square into 1 plus e. When this right hand side is minimum, 1 by r is minimum and r will be maximum. R will be maximum. So for a large r, theta will be 180. Theta will be 180. So for the largest value of r, you take theta equal to 180, then cos 180 is minus 1. So 1 by r2 you can write it as mk by L square into 1 minus e. Adding these two, 1 by r1 plus 1 by r2 equal to 2 mk by L square. Take LCM, r1 plus r2 divided by r1 r2 is 2 mk by L square. r1 plus r2 is 2a. R1 R2 is a square into 1 minus e square, that is equal to 2 mk by L square. So 1 minus e square is L square by a mk. 2 will cancel, L square will come to this side, 1a will cancel, remaining is L square by a mk. Substitute this value here for 1 minus e square. Then I will get tau square equal to 4m square pi square a raised to 4 divided by L square into L square by amk. One of the a will cancel. So tau square is 4m pi square by k into a cube. So tau square is equal to 4 pi square m by k into a cube. So tau square is proportional to a cube. Square of period of revolution is proportional to cube of the semi-major axis. Actually, if we consider Earth revolving around the Sun, this m should be replaced to the reduced mass. Okay, that is the idea of reduction of a two-body problem into equivalent one-body problem. Okay, here we used the expressions for a single-body problem, and in order to make it two-body problem, you have to substitute this m as the reduced mass of Earth and the Sun, and it is me ms divided by me plus ms. Me is 5.98 into 10 to the power 24 kilograms, and mass of Sun is 2 into 10 to the power 30 kilograms. So when you substitute back here, you can see that this reduced mass is approximately equal to mass of Earth. Okay, so no issue if you substitute here the mass of Earth itself. Okay, it will not make much difference because reduced mass is almost equal to mass of Earth. That is why in most of the cases, we know there is no need to consider the reduced mass. The error will be very small. Okay. Also K, in the case of Kepler problem, we take the potential as minus K by R, but for planetary motion, K is GMM. And if Earth is moving around Sun, this will be MS and ME. So this K is actually GMSME, MSME. If you substitute here, ME will cancel and you will get it as 4 pi square GMS into a cube. So this is the proportionality constant between tau square and a cube. So this is third law of planetary motion. Square of period of revolution is proportional to cube of semi-major axis. So these are the three laws of planetary motion. First one is Every planet revolves around the sun in an elliptical orbit with the sun at one of its foci. Second one is areal velocity of the planet is a constant, and third one is square of the period of revolution is proportional to cube of semi-major axis. Thank you.